Okay. Good morning. We will go ahead and begin the Water Rates Committee meeting this morning. It is the 15th of September at 9 a.m. in the morning, and it's chilly in this room, which keeps us awake. Welcome everybody at home and on your computers. I guess we can dive right into, we've created a small little PowerPoint that'll help, I think, sort of make our way through this morning and help us sort of facilitate conversation. Because where we kind of, at least in staff's terms, we've got a few questions. We've got some things that we've put together on some questions that you both have asked us over the last period of time. I think we reached a milestone that we originally, well, as of June, if I can say that, have started working through, which is really understanding whether or not the third of a 3-year rate package study would be adequate for the 2021 budget year. I think we've got there.
A third of
the third year.
The third year.
The third year of that 5.72 rate package that was approved by the board in 2019.
Right.
So we've reached that point. Now we have said to the board that we, as a Water Rates Committee, would go ahead and continue to meet on an ongoing basis with the goal of by August of next year of having a new rate package in hand. And so we thought, as this committee would take sort of a monthly stab at addressing topics and ideas and issues that affect rates overall throughout the district. Those include, what sort of classifications of customers are there? Where are we with raw water versus treated water? Where are we with different revenue options? Where are we with different abilities to augment budgets and delay projects? How can we continue to use or not use capital? What is the right amount of funding from hydroelectric in light of FERC? So there's a number of different levers that are at our disposal, and today we brought forth some customer classifications, both in the raw and the treated types. You've wanted to take a look at that. What are some, just to get an understanding of what are the classification types. And we can cover that in a minute, but I really, before we got into it, I wanted to hear from the two of you. What are your objectives for this process? What are your goals? We know that we have moved into 2021 budget with a roughly $13 million subsidy that we have brought over to help subsidize the rates, the water rates. We've done that from a number of different ways in 21.
Right.
We did that through hydroelectric revenues. We've done that through utilizing our property tax money to help offset debt. We've used it also to delay O&M projects in 2021 and adjust budgets to reflect about a $3 million delay and cut in 21's budget. Staff does not believe that this whole package is a sustainable process. We would really like to understand kind of where the thought process of the two of you are, and kind of get to a point of a vision so that when we leave here today, we can better understand your thoughts and your ideas so that next meeting, when we set objectives and goals for the next meeting, there's homework, there's things that we can do in the background and we can bring forth, including, research and stuff that all of us can put forth. So I kind of wanted to open up here as sort of a philosophical conversation. I don't think we're going to get into the model, the financial model yet. We're not quite there. There's just a number of things that we should be thinking about, so that when we're done, we have a general understanding of the direction. So,
Well said. Very well said. Want to go first?
Oh, you can go first if you want.
Ladies first.
All right, now we have an idea.
So that way my monologue can be churning while you're talking, right?
Yeah, I think that I want, out of this process, I'd like to see a holistic look at all aspects of revenue, of charges, of fees, of everything that we look at our rate schedules. There's, how many schedules are there? Chip, there's like 10 or 15.
30 pages.
30 pages of schedules. 30 pages. And I don't have, I've tried to read through them and make sense of them, and I read that, when someone has a connection charge or a capacity charge, or we have MOUs, and we have all these different metrics of how we assess charges and gain revenue for the water. And I'd like to, by the end of the day, look at all of those. Everything's on the table as far as I'm concerned. If there's been something that's been neglected for years because we just haven't gotten to it, and we've always, we just have not looked at it in the last 5 to 7 years, I want to look at it. I want to make sure that it's up to current charges and standards. If we charge $600 to put in a box, how much does that really cost? Are we subsidizing that? I want to make sure that all customers are paying their fair share, and that some aren't getting a better break than others. Or I just want to make sure it's equitable and fair, and that we're not subsidizing some markets while overcharging other markets. And so,
Okay.
I think that it's important to just understand how does that raw water, we've always synonymously used raw water, we call it ag water. Well, what is that block of water? How do we arrive at that volume of water that we're delivering? And who are those people, and how efficient is it, and that kind of thing. And I also want to make sure that we're not too short-sighted as we're looking forward, that we're not going to just have perpetual rate increases. And so I think that we need to look at our sister agencies across the foothills that are in similar situations and see what their structures are like. And, I was looking at Tuolumne Irrigation District's packages and just looking at EID, just looking at the different, seeing what other people are doing, so we can get an idea of maybe where we're overlooking potential revenue.
Okay.
That's one thing.
That's one thing.
So go ahead, Chris. What do you think?
Okay, so Laura used the word holistic. I'm not sure I know what that means as versus something we haven't been doing, or that if you could clarify that for me. I think I have a fair understanding that going forward, if I have to put words in your mouth, I think it's for us to get a better grasp on the whole big picture.
All the components.
All the components, okay.
Yeah, I want to look at all. I want to
Holistic,
disaggregate them and put them back together and look at them and make sure that
Right.
it's okay. I want to look at the contracts. I want to look at the MOUs. I want to look at, whatever we've got going.
Right. So for myself, I'm been struggling with getting the holistic view also, and getting a grasp of what it costs, why it costs to do what we do. And since we started with the philosophical, I'll start with the philosophical part of what is my goal here, okay? And so I talked to a few members of the ag community, as we know, that are adamant about our history, how we got where we are, and wanting to maintain that, thinking we need to maintain that. And I fall in that category on one side. The other side of me, since coming to advisory meetings and looking at the numbers and looking at the use that's not sustainable in its present form. and how we get to, how we maintain it. And then each person's sustainability is a different level also. That's, I think we need to, going forward, need to define what is sustainable for NID. Okay, what is, we are a unique district. I don't disagree with checking on, reviewing what other districts do and what they charge and how they subsidize, if we want to use that word or not, their ag community. And, but pretty much all in the category of, as Laura has so aptly put since she's been here, that we don't value water highly enough as a society in general. And how do we get that? Now, I feel I do, and so I'm passionate about keeping it going, keeping it sustainable. I know this budget for this year is not sustainable. I'm aware of that. I'm also happy with the notion of taking a pause and really spending, and I think it's a great idea, spending the whole year with the Water Rates Committee going forward to keep looking at these things. I was prepared after my first advisory meeting here 3 or 4 years ago that the rates have got to go up. They need to go up to keep pace with what's going on in the world, what it costs to do business. And I know that different, and I'm speaking just for ag right now, that different segments of ag fall in different positions with this because not all of them use that volume of water. And so a small amount of water does not affect their bottom line. I mean, their amount of water that they're paying for does not affect their bottom line like it might cattle guys that are irrigating pasture. So I'm right up against that wall too because I fit that category. If I can afford to pay more for my water with what I'm doing. And I think if we had and this is what we don't know, what we have, what the ag community, larger ag community, not just the ones I'm hearing from, because we're only hearing from 3 or 4 or 5 on a regular basis about this issue. And so I think there's a fair amount more that, because of the nature of the economics of ag in Nevada and Placer counties, that they're already subsidized, they're outside subsidizing their operations. So therefore, I feel they can afford to pay more for their water. Is that a long answer to the question, or what do I expect to get out of it?
Sure.
I think going forward that we are faced with, we have to look at both sides, and that's why I was pleased with the budget process this year, that we were more able to look at what things cost and where can we cut them, how can we manage them, and not just say we got to raise rates to cover the cost because this is what it costs. And that's, I think, is the holistic view that Laura is talking about, looking at both sides in depth and balancing that and saying, okay, this is the big picture. We can't just look at our bill and say this is the picture. You have to say, what is the big picture across the board? And we do have a very diverse, unique irrigation district, a lot of historic infrastructure, old infrastructure, we know that, and I like fixing antiques. I like restoration more than I like building new stuff, but building new stuff is fun too. So anyway, if that sort of answers the question, I don't know, but I think going forward we need to do all of that stuff.
Okay. And I have heard from members of the ag community saying we're pricing them out of business. And increasingly, especially, I think, the face of agriculture is shifting. It's not the large ranches anymore. It's smaller boutiques, I guess, for lack of a better word. But it's people doing more with less water. So these 1-inch customers, some of them are really trying to make a living with that 1 inch. But that's the most expensive water we have. And so, I like the idea that you had mentioned maybe we've got to explore the ag community to find out who are these customers and how many are in the different classifications and what amount of water are they using. It's kind of to survey and get their take. I really would like to invite the ag community into this conversation because they are one subset, and I'd like to identify other communities and invite them in to talk about it and, find out that there's the fire suppression, there's benefits to delivering water. And if we price people out of water, we're kind of missing the point, I think. So we need to make it as affordable for everybody.
Well, we've heard from, we have heard a couple different times from, I know Dan Macon, who we've spoken with quite a bit,
his name, yes.
and recently, and he's mentioned a couple times about a type of a survey. There's ideas for, he's mentioned the term price elasticity, which is out there, and there's an opportunity to work with him and his team, I think, within this time period, to help us identify certain aspects that might be a little more opaque to us, that might help us give some insight into some of these considerations from both the Glasser and the Nevada Farm Bureaus, as well. So I think there's an opportunity to move forward with some of that work in a short amount of time. I mean, this stuff doesn't have to take months. We can have some information within a couple months' time, I think, and help us identify moving forward. So there's one of the things here was that I know we've spoken about in the boardroom a couple times lately in the board meetings has been this component of the ag committee and additional or augmented ag subsidies. We speak in terms of raw water sometimes as ag water. It's not always ag water. It's raw water, right? And there's different uses of that. We'll take a look at that earlier in just a little bit.
So I did talk to Dan Macon recently about, and he proposed the survey, and he's waiting for me to call and say, ready, set, go, and I haven't mentioned that here. Also, a conversation with Roger Ingram, who I've heard on this subject for many years, and so I disagree that the water is pricing these people out of business. I think that in the bigger sense, and I have a paper my father wrote in 1985 that I've intended to copy and pass out about the economics of agriculture, and water was only one component. That in my personal business, it was not the water that put me out of business commercially. So I see economics of scale and efficiency as being a bigger part of that for ag in both Placer and Nevada County. So there's that. I don't dismiss the fact that the water bill is especially, and I'll keep iterating that, especially for large irrigators. I mean, large tracts of land that they're irrigating for. So I think there's a lot of nuances there, and I think that both Roger, he's still, I know he's retired, but he's still a voice out there, had a lot of experience in that, and has a pulse on the broader ag community. I think so I don't know how we want to go forward with Dan's proposed survey, or do that for the ag part.
Has he proposed he's going to coordinate? So he's with UC Extension,
yes,
Cooperative Extension.
We actually have a draft copy of that survey at the moment.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
right.
Okay.
But he's coordinated with the ag commissioners as well as the farm bureaus. And do you think that's been
not exactly sure.
Has it been vetted across?
I invited Dan to specifically be on the call today. He couldn't, but I think, in terms of, I don't want to speak for him or know who his coordination parties are, but I'm pretty certain there's a large contingent of the farm bureaus, ag commissioners, et cetera.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're casting our net far and wide.
Yeah. Got a pretty
I think moving forward with that part, kind of doing like this is, it would be valuable too, because we can we can argue all day what we think about what's happening with ag, right? And,
No, we want, that's the goal, I think is to bring the ag community in particular to this discussion as we move forward. Now, there certainly are other factors and user types of the raw water that are outside of the ag community.
right.
However, it is a large component of the user type of the district.
Now that you mentioned that, there was a document, I didn't bring it with me, I forgot that folder, but, like the top 10 users consume how much of the raw water? Do you have that number, Chip?
Yeah, and actually, when you look at the top 10 of our users, it's fairly well spread out. So of the top 10 raw water customers, it's only 12% of our water, 12.75.
Oh. Okay, because I should have brought my document, that's different than what I found, but yeah, okay.
Clarify that statistic for me.
Yeah,
The
so,
top 10 being the what?
Largest.
so based on annual payments,
Oh, annual payments, okay.
yeah, our top 10 water users only use 12.75% of our total raw water.
Raw water, so the other 88, whatever the number is
Yeah,
going where?
it's spread out. It's a lot of
spread
little
out
customers.
To a lot of customers.
It's not like we have a lot of very large customers being the majority of our water use.
Right.
What we find is actually we have a lot of small 1-inch type users that are spread throughout, and that's
Okay.
our biggest majority.
And this list does not include the cities?
This does include the cities. In fact, our number one customer is Placer County Water Agency,
Okay,
and that's to supply water to Lincoln.
okay. So there, so I'm looking at their rate versus what a farmer pays. I assume they're different?
It's a very different rate.
Very different rate.
They are somewhere in the neighborhood of $280 an acre foot, whereas our seasonal 1 miners inch raw water users only paying $35 an
Yeah.
acre foot, plus the fixed fee.
Right, okay. So we have a complex thing to look at.
We sure do.
We do.
Right.
And I think this is
And-
really good to get.
And within this rate, we, our reliability standards, because we know this water is going specifically for treated water use.
Right.
Although it's a raw water sale,
It's a municipal rate.
it's a municipal rate.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
And so you're only counting that on the volumetric charge, not on the fixed charge? That 235 versus, or 280 versus
That is
35?
the volumetric charge, correct?
Only the
Yes.
volumetric
Yes,
charge.
correct.
Fixed charge is a fixed charge.
Fixed charge is the fixed charge, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When you add the fixed charge in with a 1 miners inch seasonal customer, it ends up somewhere around the $90 an acre foot. So still much, much cheaper than the municipal rate.
So Chip, does your top 10 show, split out, some ag users in there?
There are a couple, yes.
A couple in there,
A couple very large ag users. I don't really like to spell out names in these,
Right, no, I'm
but
just
yes,
curious about that.
there are 3, and then some of the other large users are obviously the cities, and then some of the homeowners associations.
Okay.
So,
it isn't just a ag
Right.
water use thing.
No.
Yeah.
so kind of from that short discussion, I mean, I've got thinking of 3 or 4 kind of key themes, I guess, and we can keep broadening this as we move forward, but in this initial kind of thought process, and I acknowledge that I didn't really prep you on that question, so I apologize for that, but
We can,
but this, thinking of, there's certainly a, kind of in broad terms, there's the revenues and the costs associated with our water service, right? That's economics 101.
right.
Within that, we've got, what is the rate package, right? It's sort of a look of the different rate schedules, that 30 pages of different rates and tiers, fixed versus variable. How do these How are the metrics defined? When was the last time these have been updated? Have we consistently kept up with CPI on an annual basis? Do they automatically adjust, or are we utilizing 2010's numbers in 2020, right? So I think there's some clarity there that the two of you would like to sort of flush out. So that's sort of one package component. I see there's a contracts and an MOUs, sort of what is the breadth of contracts that we're working under currently with in lieu as well as of these rate schedules. So I heard you say, Laura, that there's, maybe an opportunity, or at least there's a desire to look at that and say, are these in line with where we want to be? When were they designed and defined? Do we need to look at updating them? Is there another revenue opportunity that hasn't kept pace with the cost of delivering the infrastructure over time? So I think that seems.
You mentioned CPI, and that's on some of our radars anyway.
Yeah.
The idea of that, because I've been looking at the budgets and going, okay, CPI is kicking these things all up in the expenses, but not in the revenue. So can we balance that one?
Well, and that's, I think, where it would be helpful for us to, and I don't know if that is this meeting or a future meeting, where we go through our rate packages here and show you the fees. Many, I don't know if I want to say most, but it's somewhere in the upper end, are all escalated every year by CPI. So we do try to keep up. There are a few fees and rates in here that do not, and we can look at those individually, but I want to say most of these are escalated by CPI annually.
So how does that work then with our percentage raise under 218?
So for instance, the last package was a 3-year at 5.72. So we automatically roll those rates every year at 5.72. The other fees that aren't tied to the allotment, the volume fees, things like installing a meter or upgrading, there's a fee for that, and we try to charge true cost of service. And in order to track that, we escalate it by CPI every year.
Okay.
Because we figure our costs are going up by CPI every year as well.
Good.
And we're starting at, our baseline was good, even though,
Well, and that's, some of these you'll see, if you look through our rates, you'll see that some of these actually have the date of when we developed the cost, and then you'll know how long we've been just tracking with CPI. Some of these, we occasionally go back in and review these when we think that they're out of date and try to update them as close as we can.
And that's
an
just
ongoing
an administrative activity?
Yes.
So that we wouldn't necessarily hear about it at the board?
So the CPI increase just happens every year, but if we go in and true up one of these rates that we feel is off, we go through APC and vet it through there, then it goes to the full board.
Okay.
But the base and the volumetric, that's not happening.
That happens through our rates discussion of the Prop 218 process.
Yeah.
In that process.
That's when we go through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we had, that subject did not come up in the last go-around that I recall, adding a CPI
To the rates package.
in the rates package, right?
No, that was the annual increase.
Right.
There was no adjustment to a CPI on top of a rate that has been defined by Prop 218.
Right. That's
a different, you can't really.
That's my confusion there. What can we do there? Right?
Yeah, that 5.72 included whatever CPI raise is happening.
Yeah. You can't really add another adder on top of the.
Oh, we'd like to.
For the rates, but Chip's right, these other fees, the fees associated if we go out and we check boxes and we adjust the box or we, increase the size of it, those are some flat service fees.
Right.
Those are different.
Okay.
And I understand that in the demand technical memo that was recently published, they showed us the miners, inches, and acre feet that go to mutual water companies as of 2019. Do we have the associated customers that benefit from those mutual water companies?
Yes, it depends on the mutual water company. So there are a number of those who are not state certified that we review their bylaws annually and make sure they're following the rules and regulations for a mutual. And then we also have a list of the customers that the water goes to. And we track that every year, and they pay a little extra fee for that because because it's an extra service for us to have to track them.
Right.
Others that are state certified, are a little bit different, and we allow the state to essentially police them and make sure they're doing it appropriately. And, a few years back, we changed our rules and regs and said we're only accepting state certified mutuals in the future because it's too much of a workload for us.
Is there any way we could require that everybody be state certified?
Well, we grandfathered those in that were already in existence, because we did hear from them that it was a real hardship for them to have to go back and reform and do all that. So we took the middle ground approach and said, we'll grandfather those in that exist today. All new ones will have to get state certified.
Yeah. I'd like to see that breakdown just to see,
Sure.
what they are.
So let me kind of keep going, and then we can kind of get in. There's at least one hand raised in the public, so we want to kind of.
He just lowered it again.
Okay, maybe he or she will, when we ask, we'll, so I'm just trying to, like, think about the future meetings, kind of some of the things we want to cover, some of the goals and objectives. So one was these rate schedules, metrics, how often they reviewed, kind of an overview of our rate schedule package, questions and answers there. Our contracts MOUs, sort of what those are, what those look like, what's the opportunity to amend if we would want to, timeframes on those. There's a lot of other ties within those, and so what is the real probability of looking at those and really having that as a true source? I don't know. Certainly the ag component of our raw water usage rate, and getting input from the ag community on certain aspects of that, working with Dan and his team, and then the other farm bureaus, and then on the cost side, sort of what it actually costs to run the water side of the house, what it is to, how much does it cost to do what we do, right? It's, we know it's roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 43 to, I think it's 21's budget, we've indicated about $44 million or something like that. So maybe take a look at that at some point. So those are sort of the 3 or 4 bullet points that I've got at the moment, that I've heard from you. We'll undoubtedly, I think, add more things as we move forward. But for now, just kind of wanted to get a sense of where we are, and maybe at the end we can go through. I think we can identify some things that we've talked about in the past today. We've got a couple more slides to just talk through. And then we'll just sort of wrap up at the end, think about the next steps and what the objectives, what we want at the next meeting will be. How's that? Okay, we have one hand raised. We know we have John Norton. John, are you there?
Yes, good morning. We were talking about subsidies for agriculture, and that may be well warranted, but when you have a subsidy, it's at somebody else's expense. So I would urge you to keep track of the benefits of that subsidy so it could be part of a public relations, so that the rest of the people that are providing that subsidy understand and are willing to back it up.
John, your point, this is Director Beerwagen, your point is very well taken. We did address this at the very beginning when we met with RIM about this being a bigger picture thing that we want to be sure that we're conveying to the community that we're recognizing a benefit to the community as a whole, not just to the farmers, and that they need to be brought in to understand that.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think that the cost of service study done by Bartle Wells helps us to determine what the subsidy is and who's paying what percent of their true cost of service. So we'll use that report to help spell out what those numbers actually are.
And be transparent about why we're doing this.
Yeah. That's a great point, John. I appreciate it.
Very good, John.
Yeah.
Joe?
Yeah,
Joe Fish?
sorry, guys. Thank you, Director Peters, Director Beerwagen, and Greg and Chip.
Joe Fisher here, and I didn't sign in right because I'm on a phone. It's a goofy thing. We're trying to Zoom at home, and other people in the Farm Bureau are doing the same thing, and it ties up all the bandwidth. So I would really encourage you guys. I think there's ways that we can do this social distancing wise in a town hall format, perhaps with invited members of the stakeholder community. Get those folks together where we could actually see each other face to face to discuss some of these, and maybe organically some good solutions will come out of that. I appreciate this effort here, absolutely, but it is a tick cumbersome. I'm in my pickup right now in between doing things, and it's kind of hard. I had a couple questions though. First of all, is there a way to parse out the information when we say that the largest top 10 users of raw water are actually 10 to 15% of the district? Is it also, is the information available to look at what percentages actually had conservation efforts when called for from NID or PCWA in those times? Who were the people that cut back? Who were the people that were innovative? And who are the ones that were helping during times of short supply and drought? And then the other one that I had was directed more towards Director Beerwagen. And I do agree with the premise of the cost of water didn't put any of us out of business, but it could be articulated that taxes didn't put us out of business, and that fuel prices and labor and all those things didn't put us out of business. I think that one thing to remember is that all of us here in this community need to protect and serve the community of Nevada and Northern Placer counties. And I do believe that it is incumbent upon us to realize that these rates may be the final straw that breaks the camel's back. And I don't think that it is a positive image of those counties to push the mantra of efficiency and vertical integration. There's a lot of value provided to these communities by the actual farmers who are here that are, I don't even want to say generational farmers, because a lot are first generation farmers that are doing some terribly is not the right term, extremely beneficial things to our communities. And I know semantically what you were saying, but I also know that there are a lot of people listening in and a lot of people following those examples. And when you come from an ag community and make statements like that, I think it just cracks the door of critics who would say, well, go ahead and raise the rates. They'll be fine if they're innovative. I think a lot of us look to the reliability and affordability of water as the barometer of if we will be able to stay in business or if land conversion needs to take place. And I've articulated this before, the only true land conversion that makes sense on a dollars and cents scale in California is houses. And so unless we're willing to accept that, which I don't think that this group is, based on talking to you guys in private and public before, I think that we kind of need to table that comment about water putting any of us out of business.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Joe, for your comment. Bottom line, since I've been on the board, is who ultimately is going to pay for these things, and where does the money come from? And being stuck in the budget position we are, that is a rock and a hard place thing. And so my comments are based on the whole picture. While I don't disagree with anything you said, is the community going to have a bake sale, and support agriculture? So that's where those comments are coming from. Having looked at these three budgets now, and the challenges of who pays for, say, when you guys water pasture for fire protection is a benefit to the county, but who should pay for that benefit? Fire hydrants are another one. Who should pay for that benefit? And these things are all keep landing back on the district as though we are a gold pot at the end of the rainbow, and we're not. So that's the direction I'm looking at. Well, like I said, I don't disagree with your comments about agriculture or going out of business. I think I'm presented with looking at the big picture. The board is the whole big picture, and we are trying to be cognizant of all of that. So thank you for your comment.
And I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I do absolutely understand what you're saying when it comes to the whole picture. Completely understand that that's just a bullet point that I had. And but the other one about conservation and who's conserving when you guys ask it, I think it'd be interesting to look at that. And I don't disagree with subsidies being paid for by someone else. I know that that's what happens, and I understand that. But I also think that there could be some innovative approaches and some of those might come out of some unlikely places if we were able to actually sit down face to face and have almost like a workshop of sorts of stakeholders within the community.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for that comment. This is, this era of Zoom doesn't really, lend itself to the best interaction component. So appreciate you sitting in your truck while we're talking, but, it would be nice to begin getting this room back to some element of population. Taking a look and seeing what the county's doing. I know that Nevada County is just, I think they have their first in-person, council meeting coming up here shortly, and kind of we're all watching that to see how well that goes, because I believe they tried one not long ago and it went horribly wrong. So we want to be careful, but in the meantime, keep your don't lower your data plan quite yet.
I won't, and I do have one more comment on the if I may, if there's somebody ahead of me with a hand, I can wait till the end of the line. Am I okay, Greg, or no?
Yeah, Joe, go ahead. You're online.
Okay. The one that I've struggled with and looked at the cost of use study that I think that we miss a little bit on, and it's so hard to parse this out. And I understand when you're trying to compare apples to apples, there are certain liberties that need to be taken. But if we're just being frank and we're a room full of honest people that are advocates for the district as a whole, which I would consider myself, and I would hope everybody would consider you guys as well, and the listeners, there are a lot of people in the ag community and the larger raw water community that if that gets taken out of the equation, which I understand that's the easy argument, right? We say rates go up, take that out of the equation. It's not going to completely happen. I get that. But just in premise, how much ditch maintenance type of things, how much cleaning of boxes, how much just eyes and boots on the ground by actual landowners or rate users is a benefit to the district that actually reduces cost of raw water delivery. And if we were truly parsing out what those costs were, and we had an NID guy in a blue or gal in a blue shirt going and doing those things that a lot of the raw water users are using, it would make that cost exponentially increase as well. And I don't know where I'm going with that. It's just something that I hope is always in the back of everybody's minds when we look at the cost of use study as well.
That's a good point that hasn't been considered. It's the old, do I go clean the box myself because I hurry up and get it done, or do I call the guy out?
Yeah. So Joe, I just want to dig in on that for 1 second. Are you if I understand you right, that the thought is somewhere in the neighborhood of what is the cost savings to the overall cost of service? Should there be some element of private landowners where a canal might be flowing through their property, taking some form of responsibility to the maintenance of these canals and the water that flows through them, and et cetera? Is that, what are the savings that might reflect?
What I'm trying to say is there's an additional benefit of a lot of the raw water users in overall ditch maintenance that probably is not did you guys get that? Or my battery just said low. Did you get that?
No.
There is a benefit that is not accounted for anywhere. And I don't think it's possible to truly parse that out, but there is a benefit that the ag users provide to the greater district. I shouldn't say ag. A lot of the raw water users provide to the district as a whole that you can't truly parse out in those numbers. And it's hard to do, right? When you're looking at a budget and you're looking at pluses and minuses and where to cut or where to expand. And I get that. I've had those discussions before. But in the back of everyone's mind should be the overall benefit to the community, both in a servant role, but then more so financially too. If you have to pay ditch tenders to do what the community is doing a lot of the times, we aren't going to be able to afford that as a district either. So I don't know where I'm going, but it is a fact that if you ask most people who are walking ditches would say, yeah, that exists.
So Joe, this is Chris again. I'm assuming you're talking about those people that have been doing that on their ranch or near their ranch, like I myself have done in the past.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Go
Got
clean the box.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
you're just an on-call committee for NID too. Like you're somebody who is there. And when I say you, use it proverbially, right? And it could be somebody with a 1 acre lavender farm, or it could be someone with 1,000 acres of rice. But it's making it so that we don't have NID ditch tenders living on a ditch. They're on a route of ditches, and then as needed, they're put into service. And everybody likes to point to the bad actor that, you know, hey, he pulls up his board or whatever. And traditionally, there are a lot of people that have great relationships with their ditch tenders, and there's a real give and take with that relationship on how to best serve the water needs of the community that's paying for it. And again, I think that just needs to be in the back of everybody's mind when we look at the rate study, to know that there is a benefit a benefit given in the overall community that is probably not accounted for.
I can appreciate that comment, Joe. This is Chip. I will say, though, I think that those benefits are captured in our cost of service study. We do realize that some of those folks are very proactive in cleaning their own boxes and screens, and it's appreciated. But absent those folks, if they weren't doing that, it would require more distribution operators and personnel to run the system. By the nature of our limited staff, we've already kind of captured our current costs, put them in the cost of service study. So I think it captures those savings based on that. If those folks were not doing that, it would take more staff and our cost of service would be higher and would be reflected in the cost of service study. Did that make sense?
That's fair enough, Chip. Absolutely fair enough.
Okay. But it's a great point, and you're right. We are getting some benefit from our raw water users being very proactive out there. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Joe. Is there another hand up? Michael Philwell. Can you hear us, Michael?
Yes. Good morning.
Okay. Go ahead.
I want to compliment Greg on his leadership of this exploration that you're on concerning the revenues and the expenditures of the district, and the quality of the conversation that Chris and Laura are having. I think this is long overdue, and I think it's the right direction for you to take. I do have one question, though. I would like to better understand the context of Prop 218 that these subsidies exist under. So I'm not expecting that today, but I'm hoping that at one of your future meetings, you'll take a look at the role of Prop 218 in the setting of rates and entering into contracts and MOUs. In the meantime, thank you very much. This is very, very high level. I appreciate it.
Michael, thank you for your comment. That particular subject is on the radar. We've talked about it, and talked to the attorneys about it. We don't have a totally clear picture on that one, but working on it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we don't see any more hands at the moment. Why don't we move into the first slide? We've got three.
Okay.
3 slides, pretty quick and easy. But just wanted to give you some numbers that you'd asked for. Next slide. Yeah. So hopefully you can see some of that. So these are, now I want to caveat some of these numbers here because we have a relatively antiquated system, which is why we're spending a lot of money right now in upgrading our ERP and CMMS programs. We have a very old legacy system where there's some inconsistencies in some reportings, but in general, the numbers you're going to see here may not exactly match what we've seen at other times, but sometimes it has to do with the time of year, the year being looked at, but we're pretty close on all these numbers. In general, there was a question regarding the treated water customers, right? What are the classifications that we have for treated water customers? Here are the different sort of categories. We don't have different classifications. Now, Chip, correct me if I'm wrong on some of this conversation, but You can see that by far, the single-family user is our largest user. And in the cost of service study, we do break these down as well by meter size, which is not here on this particular slide, the white bucket. But then the different flows from the different treatment plants, you can see on the lower right, which is the total amount of acre feet that each treatment plant pretty much produces for this amount of customer.
Is that per day, or, because acre feet's the volume and flow's the rate? Is that
That's
acre feet
that's a
per
volume.
year?
Per
That's
year.
an annual, yeah,
That's an
that's
annual.
one year water use.
1 year
Yeah,
of water.
roughly
Okay.
1 year of water use from each of these facilities.
Water produced.
Yes.
So as we move into sort of this conversation, as we move forward with rate schedules, these are not intended to be the end of these conversations, but I wanted to kind of give you, we wanted to give you an overview of some of our baseline that we work with.
On the category list is the multiple family, is that the mutual water companies?
No, this is treated water only.
Yeah,
Multiple,
Mutuals are all raw water, right?
yeah, multifamily would be
Yeah.
like apartments or
Apartments,
duplexes or
Okay.
Trailer
trailer
parks?
parks,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. So go to the next slide. So the next few are really, that was treated water. Remember, treated water roughly is about 10%
Yeah.
of
roughly.
total water use of the district. Raw water delivery, for any number of purposes, is roughly 80%, and the remainder is, I think, the environmental flow.
And I have a quick
At the
question
top.
on that. So the raw water feeds the treated water plants, right? So we count it as raw water, and then we count it as treated water also? So it's the same water molecules, it's before and after treatment.
Yeah, that's a good point. So in the grand scheme of things, it has the potential to be double counted at the gauging stations, but we can back it out based on, we know, so the water going through the treatment plants is metered in real time, so we know what that number is. At the end of the year, we can back that back off of the raw water gauges so that we're making sure we're not double counting those.
Okay. And
That's
so
a
we
good
do
point.
that?
Yeah.
We do that? Okay. Because I noticed in the memo that it was noted in both places. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute.
No, that's a good catch. And in the cost of service study, we did our best to also break down each canal and what percentage of the flows in that canal are for raw water and what percentage of those canal flows are for treated water, so that we could capture the costs appropriately and make sure we divvy out those costs to the appropriate categories.
So this slide is a summation of really 6 months of the year. And we wanted to show you, based on the volume size of the different customers that we have throughout a summer raw water account season. You can see that under 1 miner's inch of demand is roughly about 6% of the total volume sold, yet it's 30% of the customer base. And kind of that 1 to 3 miner's inches of demand is nearly 34% of total volume sold, but well over half of the total customer base.
Yeah.
So we thought this sort of metric was an interesting look at the different demand types, and as we look towards different raw water uses and different ag components, right, we see that, you know, those over really using a lot of water, over 50 miner's inches. There's nearly 14 of them, you know, a very small percentage of the total amount of customer, yet it's nearly 10% of the volume. This is a 6-month period, right? This is not the whole winter, summer. But just it as a benchmark for us to start thinking about, this is the variability of our customer base and the usage rates.
That's really, this is very interesting.
It's very interesting, yeah.
So really, less than 10% of these customers are utilizing 60 to 70% of the actual water. 60%. 12 to 24,
Which customer are you looking at?
34, 41, 50, 51%. The greater than 5 miners inch customers.
Over 5 miners inch, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is
Yeah.
information, really. We just kind of wanted to, kind of put it in here. I don't really have any, I mean, unless we don't really have, we're not deferring and disseminating right or wrong here or what's out there, but this is, based on some of our customer use.
Right. It goes to the fixed charge as well, because all these 2,000 miners are all paying fixed charges.
Yeah.
Like the mutuals, you get these mutuals with all these people, they only pay one fixed charge and they
Mm-hmm.
divide the cost. And so the fixed element is such a greater proportion of the bill. The smaller.
Right.
When you have the 1 minor inch customer, correct.
Right.
Correct. That's right. That's the most expensive
Right.
molecule, is that first
Yeah.
one, right? By
Right.
the time you get deeper or more, then the cost of water gets a lot cheaper. We have one raised hand. We can, you okay if we bring
I'm
in
absolutely fine.
comment as we move?
Yeah.
John Norton, are you there?
Yes, I just wondered if that last chart included Grass Valley, City of Grass Valley, and Placer County Water Agency as the large users.
Yes, it did.
Okay, but it does not include other treatment plants like Lake Wildwood and E. George.
No, it does not include the treatment plants, no. Not NID facilities, but
Right.
yes, certainly the cities and PCWA are included in that.
Okay, thank you. Just a clarification.
Yep. Let's go to the next slide. It's hard to see, at least my old glasses. I have my new prescription's on its way. So this is another sort of breakdown. You again, back to the question that you had previously is what's the customer classifications that we have? We don't have different classification of customers based on our rate factor, a miner's inch is a miner's inch, and cost. But when we do our crop report on an annual basis, this is the data that we received from our customer base, and this is the information that we supply to the state on an annual crop report basis. As you can see, as might be expected, roughly 30% of our customer base from the 2019 crop report is kind of the forage, the hay grow, the irrigated pasture lands, right? So they're all kind of combined in together. The crop report actually breaks it out much deeper, and for this particular report, I consolidated it. So which irrigates roughly 65% of the total irrigated lands of the district, and uses roughly 60% of the total volume of water. Let's see. So then the second largest group of user in this classification is that family garden, family orchard category, where they're self-defining themselves here. Remember, this isn't a particular classification that we define. This is a state-based process that the customers define for us on an annual basis. And so they're roughly 45% of the total customer number, utilizing roughly a quarter of the total water demand. Again, as we go deeper into future meetings, I think this is interesting information. If and again, it's not for right now. It's information. I mean, we can glean thoughts and ideas off it, but it does help give a clearer picture of where our water flows and what it's used for, right?
Back there, will they see me?
Sure, Joe, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. And if it ever gets old, just move on past me. I want to try to build this conversations while I'm asking these questions. Have we ever been able to parse out how much of that water is reused? Like, let's take Rice for example. You guys, let's say you send very, very not accurate numbers, right? 100 miners inches goes down the Bear River to Camp Far West, but then 300 miners inches is used by rice growers. I know it's a lot more. I'm just saying for simple math. How much of that is the second or third time that water's been sold by just tailwater, basically? Do you have that information, or how hard is it to obtain that? Or I guess what I'm saying is we know that some of that rice water has been resold. Can we get a handle on how much that number really is?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. As far as the district facilities go, any canal that terminates and then the tailwaters leave the district boundary, we try to monitor and gauge every single one of those canals so that we know that's water being lost to the district. On the canals that the tailwater flows into a natural creek and then gets rediverted into another canal, we're aware of those. We don't really track it because we measure it at the next canal that it's back in, that flows back into. So to your point, very, very hard to quantify, but we do try to quantify the locations where we know water's being lost to the district and flowing on down the hill to the valley floor. That doesn't really specifically answer your question, but just to let you know, we're aware of that and trying to track it the best we can.
Thank you.
Is that measuring all the, say the Chicago Park ditch overflows into Rawlins Lake? Or the Chicago Park East, the Chicago Park ditch overflows and runs into Bear River below Rawlins Lake. So are there numbers for that? The amount that has to keep the ditch full, right?
Yeah, so we're measuring the head of every canal.
Right.
So we know what water's going in. In your particular example, we're going to reuse that water at the tail end of that canal back into Rawlins. We're going to redivert it and pull it back out, use it again. May make it back into the Bear River. We're going to pull it out at Combie again and use it for Placer County. So,
well, that's really skewing some numbers, though, isn't it? I can wrap my head around this line.
yes.
We put so many inches in, and then we took it back out. We put it back in over here, so there's kind of a fudge factor in there, isn't there? I mean, for the overall water use.
Correct. Yes, but it's all factored in because we're measuring the source. We're measuring the head of every canal, so we know overall globally how much water we're going through, how much of it is reused and repurposed as it goes through the system. Very, very hard to quantify. So we spend more time just tracking the holistic number of how much we go through every year. That's
because
more
you hear this
specific.
Argument from all the flood irrigators around Nevada County, where they're, what about the water that I've irrigated with and it went down the hill?
Used again.
You can add to that discussion and say, what about the water, the tailwaters of our canals that just flow across the land and replenish the groundwater supply?
Groundwater, yes, right. Exactly. How much is going in the ground? There's a great question.
Yeah.
There's a benefit we can sell to the community, right?
Groundwater banking.
Groundwater banking, inadvertent groundwater banking.
There you go.
Well, those are all
Yeah.
fun topics, but anyway,
Right.
try not to get off in the weeds.
So did the previous slide have the total volume, the 12,345 miners inches and acre feet?
Yeah.
So that is the summer category in this slide, right? This is just the summer seasonal account. The next slide, I think, is annual, which is why the numbers don't match.
A little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not much more. And so this doesn't account for the cities and Placer.
The crop report does not, right, correct.
And so these are so close together as the other one, and the other one did include them.
Yeah,
But that was only 6 months, that's why.
that's correct, yeah.
And remember, some of the county, I believe Nevada City, they have their own, I mean, there's there's rights that they have that are in the winter months?
Yeah, correct.
Correct?
They use their own water as long as they can, their own water rights, and then in the summer months, we supplement them. But again, these numbers are a little wonky. Our systems are so archaic, it's hard to get identical reports. And then let's add to that, every single day we're having accounts change hands, move, go in, increase,
Yeah.
decrease. So it's a moving target.
Moving target.
Yeah. We've tried to we've tried to give as clear of a picture, but it's not 100%, guys, and we want to kind of take it with a bit of a grain of salt.
Yep, we do.
So, you know, there's sort of that factor, which we hope that once we get this ERP system, and honestly, this is a huge factor with the ERP and the CMMS programs, is to help us as the district as a whole, kind of get to the point we're out of different spreadsheet models and we're building into a more unified process, so.
And where are we with that process?
Well, the reason why Marvin is not here today at our rates committee is because he is meeting with his staff on moving that project forward.
Good.
The staff it's critical that staff is intimately involved in the development of that
Oh, yeah.
model, because they're the ones that have to use it. I've seen over and over consultants develop models and hand it to you, and then you never use it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we don't. So
And we've had that, I mean, the current models, current systems, we currently have
Yeah.
that same
good.
legacy issue. But, anyway, that's sort of so this was we thought interesting, and then here's just a bit more of the municipal summary, in terms of acre
this
feet,
is
and it's not broken down by miners inches.
This is annual or summer?
This would be annual.
Total.
Annual. This is
Yeah.
annual, okay.
These are good. This is interesting. So it's really not, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much.
Right. Volume-wise, no.
Yeah.
Income, revenue-wise, yes.
Okay.
Because of the reliability factor that they pay the higher rate.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Good.
Terrific.
Those
Lake
are
Vera.
the
Where's Lake
numbers.
Vera?
What's Nevada City?
Hmm?
Nevada City, above Nevada City.
So I think that's the last slide, that we brought today.
Are these posted?
Yeah, I believe so. They will be, yeah, as an archive. So that you can go back and look at them. You've asked to bring some classifications, some numbers, both treated and raw. Here they are in a, if there's, I mean, some of these came from large spreadsheets. They can dig in, but we made them a bit more user-friendly so that we can look at them in a broad scheme today. I guess from here, is there any further questions from the committee? And then I think it's time to think about what's next, right? Where do we want to focus our next meeting, and what do we want to hope to gain out of it? Did we gain enough information today? Do we want to talk about any of these specifics now that you've looked at them a minute?
Yeah. And going forward, I'd like to get the slides ahead of time so I can have looked at them instead of looking at them
morning.
right now.
I agree with you. I know.
Yeah, because I probably have a lot of questions, but I won't,
Sure.
I wasn't
And we can
able
come back
to assimilate it.
This is the point, Laura. I think this is based on some of these ideas that you guys
Yeah.
expressed early in this meeting. This is going to take a while to move through.
Right.
We're gonna think about other things and come back. So I think it's probably worth the 3 or 4 weeks to think about it, jot some ideas down, come back, and we can then explain, what ideas you might and thoughts you've had now today.
I think we could add to that and maybe bring forward the rate schedule and maybe walk through those. That could be one topic, although that one will be rather timely because there's a lot of them. But
Yeah.
I think that would give the basis and of
Sure.
what our fees are, how we escalate them, and inform that half of our total rate structure, right?
I think that's probably a good one to have maybe next meeting, is really just walk down the rate schedule so that you become familiar with what it looks like. Yep.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of fixed fees that are escaping us. And so the fixed fees are falling a greater burden on a much smaller group of people when the fixed fees are what operate the system. And so to look at who's paying the fixed fees and who's not paying the fixed, these single boxes that are serving multiple
You're talking about base rates,
customers.
base
Base
rate,
rate
Oh, I gotcha.
base rate fees. And like some lines, some boxes, there's a single box, and then there's multiple customers on that private lateral.
Correct.
Do all of the other customers, does only the owner of the box pay the fixed fee? Do the other customers not have to pay that fixed fee because it's only the same
No,
box?
the fixed fee for our customers is for everybody. So we have those accounts that you're referring to where the box is owned by the primary account holder. He owns the box, he or she owns the box. They can allow that to be shared by other customers, but regardless, they're all paying the same fixed fee, they're all paying the same volumetric fee.
So
The benefit is that the primary account holder, he or she paid for the box. That's the fees that the others are not paying for. However, they're also not given the authority on the box, and at any given time, they could be kicked off. And so that's the risk they take.
Yeah,
But as far as the fees go, they're all
Right.
pay the same rate. Hope that helps.
that does help, And so then it's making me think about the mutuals. It seems like maybe some of these mutuals, it's the same concept. So we need to look at everything. We just need to look at everything and try and,
So in my case where I have 1,000-foot pipe that I own and replaced, I have two other neighbors that come off of it, but I don't have a box that's hooked to a pipeline.
Okay.
So we're all paying the base and have a off the pipe.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
that's good.
Okay, John Norton, you have a hand raised?
Yes. You mentioned a draft survey. That would be good to take up at the next meeting. And I wonder, can that draft be made available so we could all comment on it?
So the one that I made reference to is not developed by NID. It would be something that would have to come from the UC Davis extension. So that would be something I think we can speak with Dan Macon about and see what the possibility is, how they go about developing the survey and what they do with that. So
Can we invite him?
I think we can definitely invite him, and we have, and he just couldn't be here today.
Okay.
But I do think there's, this is, the idea with this was to get an understanding of what the community of raw water ag community is within the district, both Placer and Nevada.
Right.
I won't speak for Dan and the methodology that they're using and all these other things, but I think, John, your point is that, hey, what is this survey and what does it look like? We can talk to Dan offline, and we could bring him to some of these conversations. I think Joe's point, which is bringing, trying to bring a subset of the community into a smaller kind of workshop discussion is very valuable. To look at people in the eye and really look at them in the table. We do have the ability to handle a handful of people, and I think it's possible that we could make that work amongst COVID restrictions and state and county guidelines. So I think that's another opportunity that we should do here in the next, 60 days, couple months, is maybe formulate that raw water ag basis.
I would think that maybe even the next meeting, that would be a perfect to bring in the ag commissioners and the farm advisors and the UC cooperative and talk about that, so they can be running on a parallel track while we're looking at the revenues and all of that. Get them
Invitation only to those people.
get them started, and so and then while they're chewing on that, we can continue working on the.
So as the next rates committee, we bring in the advisors and the commissioners and the farm bureaus on sort of a, limited invitation
Yep.
brought here, and we could have a meeting. It'd be obviously Zoomed for the community out in the world,
Right.
but we'd have a little more focused discussion.
I think it's a great idea.
I think
Does
it's
that
a great
sound
idea.
like a
If they
good
have
idea?
draft,
Okay?
and if they could send work with them to send out something so people can not see it for the first time in the meeting. The meeting's so much more productive if you can prep for it. And so
Mhm.
to be able to have time to think about it in advance is really helpful. At least it's helpful for me. It's hard to.
Yeah, so there's a number of organizations that we've identified in the past that are sort of emblematic of kind of the ag component of our community, and these include both Placer and Nevada inclusive, ag commissioners, Farm Bureau, RCD.
Yes.
Sierra Harvest is an organization. Nevada and Placer County Grown are organizations that we've identified as sort of leaders in the organization. The Cattlewomen's Association, both Nevada and Placer.
And be a lot of people.
The UC Davis advisor. So I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of
Yeah.
stating the world of where we're
Right.
operating in,
Right.
and it is a lot of people. We're the second largest irrigation by size in the state, so of course there's a lot, and so I think there's got to be kind of cull that down a bit, and of course with the room capacity and with COVID restrictions, we can't have everybody in a space.
So we can invite them all to the conversation.
And they won't.
They're all gonna show.
Hopefully they would
Right.
not be able to, and hopefully we can have.
RSVPs from
Yeah.
them or something like
Yeah,
that.
I just wanted to reiterate to
Right.
the world is that,
Yeah,
it's not just 2 or 3 organizations. There are a number of
right.
players here that I completely agree with the concept that, as we move this forward, Prop 218 processes, as we've seen over the course of the number of years, are not always a popular product to bring forth to the community. But the more that we can bring people along, the more value we can place on the actions that the district does do, and the value that the community brings by stewarding this water, right?
Yeah.
I hope we're going to get to a point where there's a bit more buy-in and there's a bit more understanding moving forward. Joe, your battery still working in your phone?
Yeah, I'm plugged in, and you're gonna see really quickly. You don't want to involve me because I just dominate discussion. But Greg, big time kudos to you because this is arguably one of the most diverse irrigation districts in the state, in terms of complexion and complexity, and in some ways it's still very simple in terms of conveyance and stuff. But there is a diverse cross-section of community members and stakeholders, and the only way this is going to work is if everybody's pulling on the same rope. And unfortunately, for a lot of different special interest groups, maybe the only reason some exist is because they're pulling the opposite direction. And I think for the long-term viability of this body, we've got to have everybody at the table figuring this out, within obviously the health standards of the county and then the state as well. One thing I would add, though, and I would ask of you guys, this is what my initial hand raise was over, get us some information if you deem us a stakeholder, some questions, specific questions you may have for, say, the ag community, get those to me, and I can get out to some of our, I pause and say constituents because it sounds so political, but I could reach out to people within our demographics and see what they say and better represent them so that we don't go to a roundtable meeting with a whole bunch of questions that then we have to come back and report back at another time. Let's try to come up with some very specific and measurable goals and outcomes and then some marching orders for the community members, because frankly, the clock is ticking on the viability of raw water users in Nevada County, and we've got to get after it. But thank you guys for this. Thumbs up, and I don't know how long I'm gonna last, so that's my comment.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. That's a great point. Yeah, we want these to be supportive, and we want them to be comprehensive, and we should be getting work done as opposed to moving work into the future. So that sounds like sort of an idea where the next meeting is a roundtable workshop with the ag community. That would be sometime in October. Is that the right time to bring folks together? I mean, is there harvest? That's the question, I don't know. And we can, Chris, maybe that's for you. Is October the right time? I mean, we want to come as soon as we can. Is it better in November, or does it matter? Because we're talking daytime.
Right.
You know, it could be later in the day. We could have these at, 4 or 5 at night. It doesn't have to be during the moment.
So I know, I hear this often from these guys, they'd rather, I said, well, they'd rather have them later in the day.
Okay.
And our advisory committees were in the evening. They were late afternoon, but however that works the best.
So I'll coordinate with the ag community, and maybe there's, maybe this next one does work into the evening, or at least later in the afternoon, where there's an opportunity to engage more folks that are not toiling during the day, right?
I think they would appreciate that.
So what we could do is by next meeting, have our SMART goals or measurable and review them, and then send them out and give them that next month to respond, send them to all these stakeholders, solicit input, and then have the actual meeting in November. Right, because we need to.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The plan, we need to, so we can have the information in advance, so it's.
The question, he said, give us some questions, and I don't know what those questions are.
Right, I think it's Dan making initial questions that we need to vet and talk about, so we could talk about the plan next meeting, and then disseminate to the groups, and then have it come back like a week before the next one, so we can look at what the results are, and then meet in person with the relevant stakeholders.
So one of the goals of the next rates committee meeting would be to help identify a series of questions that would be potentially posed to the agriculture community for an in-person coordinated meeting in November. The October Water Rates Committee meeting discusses maybe the rate structure next time, and we kind of have a period of going through that, as well as, so there's two things, perhaps the rate structure, and then you have a series of questions that you're thinking of, and we bring those forth. We kind of identify 10 or 15 things that we want to learn.
So how would those parallel to what Dan's survey would look like?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. It could be.
I mean, that would be, logically, those wouldn't want to be
possible.
That's the survey, right?
Have the survey be the same question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, a survey, I think you can get really in-depth in a survey, and there's, elements of a survey that should be short and quick and sweet, and they're just, they're ABC answers, and then there's more in-depth, sort of nuanced questions that may or may not be involved in a survey, but there's opportunities for our constituents, as Joe said, to reach out and maybe come back with deeper thoughts on the thing. So it's possible, and maybe we bring Dan to the next meeting, and when we're talking about that, there's probably we can see where we can incorporate some of our questions and where we can't, and then those that we can't incorporate in a question, we feed back to the farm bureaus and the ag commissioners, and then there's conversation amongst the community around that, and it's a little more organic than a survey itself. Because surveys cost money, right? And could be time. So I won't speak for Dan on terms of his survey.
Right, and we didn't talk about the how to do this survey. His survey he was talking about.
We have not.
Right. So perhaps Dan next meeting to discuss that.
Okay.
and information as
Okay,
possible would
so,
be greatly appreciated.
Yes, absolutely.
so next, so the goals of the next meeting is to review the rate structure, Chip, right? And so some homework there would be for the two of you to review the rate structure in advance of next month's meeting.
Yes.
And come with particular questions. Maybe if you have some in advance, email them to me, and we can bring some of those answers a week or
And are
a
those,
few days in advance.
are those online?
Yeah. Yep.
The 30 pages you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
rate schedules, you'll see it in,
Planning.
where the district's, rules and regulations
Okay.
link is, it's right below it.
Okay.
So then there's kind of two pieces to this. So that would be the first section of the rates committee, is to review and answer some questions that you have regarding the rates. And then we kind of end it with an ag focus, and Dan, or we begin it either way. We have Dan talk about maybe the survey, sort of the methodology, about what he's thinking. Again, I'm not proposing that it's going to happen, just stating that there's an opportunity, I think,
Right.
there. And then we could pose a list of questions that we want to either have incorporated in such a survey. We can do our own survey. There's a way that we reach out to our customers on an annual basis in February when we do the crop report. So there's an opportunity there to get more information a little later in the year or in this process. And then if there's questions that don't really formulate themselves that well into a survey-based process, it's more organic in nature and thought-wise, we can just pose those to folks like Joe and the Farm Bureau and ag commissioners and just bring them into a ag-focused sort of in-person meeting in November where we answer some questions and we move that ball forward. Who is it? Michael Hillwell, are you there?
Yes, yes. Sounds like you've got a great process rolling, and I really appreciate it. Earlier, Chris made reference to a paper that his father had written about ag and water use. Would it be possible to post that or make it available?
I've been planning to do that for a long time. I discovered this winter that it's fascinating look into the future. He was looking into the future based on what was going on in 1985. So, yes, I'd be happy to do that.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks,
That's
Chris.
something that,
There was notes he made, never published them. They were just in this box of NID stuff. 3 pages of ag
just
economics.
handwritten.
Pencil written, just notes, it kind of stops, so it just kind of doesn't come to a conclusion. But it talks about needing to charge more for water, needing to be more creative about how we identifying at that time. That was the beginning of the end for our commercial agriculture, 1985, and he was reflecting on that, and that didn't have anything to do with. I mean, our issue didn't have to do with the cost of water at that time. It was a bigger ag problem, challenge. But he touched on water rates and how much an acre foot of water should cost, and looking at history and stuff like that. So it's fascinating. Just an
The
aside.
whole historical
Yeah,
perspective.
right.
Okay.
So not unlike what you heard me say today.
Okay, great. Anything, do you feel this was productive? Are we on the right track?
Very much so.
I need to know from you guys, because
No.
this is such a big beast that we need, trying to run the ship more in the direction, but I need to make sure the direction is
Right.
appropriate and that we're meeting some of our needs. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, the need comes down to money, right?
Right.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That's where we're at.
We're not kidding
We've
ourselves.
moved $13.5 million into the water
Right.
program, and we have been for many So,
Well,
this
since
whole process is,
2013.
what's that?
Since 2013. Right?
Oh, actually subsidizing water forever.
Yeah, forever.
No, it's come home to roost with me with,
For,
Water's been subsidized for a lot longer.
well, no, the power generation is not, there's a factor there. Then there's the PERC factor.
Yeah.
And then there's, CPI factor, and then there's, all those factors are ganging up on us.
Yeah.
I feel like they're ganging up on us, and, we have to do something.
And eventually, like I said at the beginning, in August would be a really nice time. August 21 would be a really appropriate time to be through a new Prop 218 process.
Through it, you mean we've still, to
Because-
create the budget.
Because around then is we're creating the budget for
Right.
22. And we really want to have from the perspective of finance and building the budget with staff, we really need to know what that
Yes.
revenue structure looks like. So that, that gives us a 12-month window here, which will run quick. We're thinking about these background ideas and getting people up to speed, but eventually we're going to get back to the model,
Yes.
and we're going to run that model through, and then we're going to think about the duration of that next 218 process. Is it 1 year? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Right? This costs some money to put this thing through, so we want to do it effectively and efficiently.
Yeah, and to make it through the notification process appropriately, we have to essentially be done by June.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
Good. Well, I think we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We keep after it,
We keep after it.
we're doing good.
and the contracts we have are not in the rate packages, right? They're not in the rate structure.
They are not, no, they're separate contracts. There's really not very many. City of Nevada City, City of Grass Valley, PCWA, that's really about it.
So we'd like to see those as
Sure.
well.
And just to reference back, the overall rate structure, the package that we utilize, the model, right? We're looking at a subset here of that full model. That model takes into account demand growth, percentages, right? It takes into account some other assumptions built into a package, a rate package that would go for 3 to 5 years. So, I think we're piecing it apart, but knowing that there are other pieces that we're going to have to be looking at as we move forward in order to, like Chip says, to have that package ready to go for a 218 public process in, June-ish
Yeah.
of next year. So, we don't want to linger too long, which is why it's effective to come into these meetings with a lot of questions that have already been asked so that we can answer them and move on.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the homework is rate structure. Look at that, understand it, bring forth questions. We'll have plenty of answers. It'd be nice if there were some questions written down. You could send us in advance,
Okay.
number of days in advance. And then we'll invite to see if Dan can come in and Dan Macon, that is, and then think about other questions that we might want to ask the ag community that are outside of that process or within it. We'll see. Questions? Any final questions from the audience? Okay. Seeing none, are you guys comfortable? We can.
Are we gonna look at when the next meeting's gonna be?
Good question.
Yeah, that's the next meeting. So, what's that?
Yes.
Why don't we do
I
that?
think that would be,
Why don't we reach out? We'll have Danette reach out to
Okay.
the two of you, and
Yep.
that will be posted well in advance in the next week, I assume. It won't be. Let's see. That's October. My guess is it'll be. I think we were thinking maybe the 3rd. Is today the 3rd Tuesday? Were we thinking that, Chris?
Yes, but the third Tuesday of October is the day before Columbus Day. We need to work out the board meeting stuff.
Okay. the thought process to keep it consistent like we do with the other committee meetings. So we'll look into that, reach out to the two of you. We'll reach out to Mr. Macon and inform the public where we're at.
Perfect.
Good, very good.
Great.
All right. Thank you all. We'll close the rates committee meeting at 10:35. Have a great day.